But we're starting in Joshua chapter 1, or that's in just a second anyway, just to give us a quick recap and reminder of where we've come so far. Really all the way back in Genesis 2, but I guess you could say Genesis 11 at least. Started right around in this area where this red dot popped up. You may not be able to see it. Abraham left there, went here, and then they kept traveling, finally made their way to Egypt. Then Moses and Aaron and the rest of the children of Israel left Egypt, go to Mount Sinai, come up, have to go around Edom. And here we are at this point in Joshua chapter 1. They've been camped here for a little while, right on the other side of the Jordan River. The other side meaning the western or the eastern side, where they have already conquered some kings. That's sort of the last few things that we looked at in Deuteronomy. Or in Numbers, I guess, the end of Numbers. Somewhere right around in there. Conquering some kings east of the Jordan. And if you remember, Reuben and Gad and half of Manasseh requested that their territories be that area that they've already taken because it just was well suited to their situations. And that was apparently not a problem because God granted them that. It wouldn't have been ideal, but He did grant them that. As you can see, these areas here to the west, here's the Jordan River. Here's Jericho. It's going to play a big role in what we're going to look at in just a second. Also plays a big role in the history of this whole account. And here are the Israelites. They're camped here. They've already taken Moab. They've got this area and all the way up, fairly far up north, I guess. And it's at this point that God is going to charge Joshua with his mission with some very powerful words. These are words that even out of the context and out of the situation are just very quotable passages. Joshua chapter 1, he says, I'll just start in verse 2. It says, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise, go over this Jordan, you and all this people, into the land that I'm giving to them, to the people of Israel. Every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given to you, just as I promised to Moses. Goes on, verse 5. Now he says, no man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life, just as I was with Moses, I'll be with you. I won't leave you or forsake you. Now, be strong and courageous, for you shall cause this people to inherit the land that I swore to their fathers to give them. Only be strong and very courageous. Being careful to do according to all the law that Moses, my servant, commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right hand or to the left, that you may have good success wherever you go. This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have good success. Be strong, be courageous, be careful to do according to all the law that Moses commanded you. Don't turn to the right hand or to the left hand, so that you may have good success wherever you go. And verse 8 is really special because of how much it applies throughout all time. Just the law that he's talking about, if you just change that to the new covenant, the New Testament. This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth. You shall meditate on it day and night. And why was he to meditate, or why should anybody meditate on it according to this verse? So that you may be careful to do what it says. How can I be careful to do according to what God's Word says? I need to meditate on it day and night. As soon as you stop thinking about it, meditating on it, it's going to be easy to slip. So meditate on it. I'm of the opinion, I pointed out in the past the distinction between reading the Bible and studying the Bible. There's also a distinction between studying the Bible and meditating on it. And a lot of the best study time can actually take place after you've closed your Bible and you're thinking on it. You give it your mind time to process what you've taken in, to digest it, if you will. Meditate on it day and night. That is really where a lot of the spiritual growth will take place, after you've stopped studying or reading and you start thinking on what you've read and studied. So Joshua's immediate problem at this point, if you want to call it a problem, was organizing the tribes. Yeah, Wayne?
I really believe world over, most Christians have a lot of knowledge of what God wants, but they're not being careful to do according to what they know.
Yeah.
And we're going to give an account for what we failed to do that we know.
Yeah. Be careful to do. He doesn't just say do it. He says you got to be careful to do it. According to all, every little bit counts. And, there are some things that I guess we would call, weightier things, heavier things that maybe not is exactly the way we judge things in our civil culture. Like murder obviously has a much heavier sentence than, jaywalking or stealing or even more serious things. But God's way of judgment may not be exactly like that, but we do sort of have a hierarchy of things in our minds, and we think, well, that's not that important, and we don't, I won't worry about that. But the stress in the Scriptures is you need to be careful to do according to everything, all of it. Don't turn from the right hand or to the left, so that you'll have success. And again, those big then, it's not technically an if-then, but it is essentially, then you'll make your way prosperous. You will make your way prosperous. Then you will have good success. Now, really, God was going to be having a big hand in the success, but the way He says it is, then you will make your own way prosperous if you are careful to do according to all that is written in the book of God's law.
It's kind of like a lot of commercials and stuff, everything's a 2-second bite. And to go along with what Wayne says, it's like a lot of people are running from God. They don't want to stop and think. They'll exercise, they'll do a lot of stuff because if they stop to think, they're afraid to do that.
Yeah.
And I think part of it is because they know if they stop to think, they've got to do something hurriedly before they can
Yeah.
take care of what's going on.
Running from bad thoughts. Yeah.
They don't want to change. It's like, I want to diet. They don't want to change and do a diet and do exactly what it says now.
Yep. We don't like to hear things that we don't want to hear, or maybe people don't want to hear. They don't want to be around people that are going to say things that they don't want to hear. So what's the trend historically is surround yourself with people that will say things you want to hear. Yes, men. That'll just tell you what you want to hear. That's what leaders have done throughout time. Think about Ahab and the 450 prophets. All said what he wanted to hear. Not Micaiah, though. That's why he didn't want Micaiah around. I don't like what this guy says. We're guilty of the same thing many times. We have to fight against that. Be careful to do according to everything, all that the book of the law says. So the immediate issue was going to be organizing the tribes for the journey into Canaan. And this is why I pointed out here, this map. Here's the Jordan River. And then the 2.5 tribes already have their territory. As far as they're concerned with their turf, they're done. But remember, Moses commissioned them and charged them and made them swear an oath that they would not rest until they helped their brothers get their land. You see, everybody fought for this land. So, Ephraim and Judah and Simeon and the other half of Manasseh and all these others, they helped Reuben and Gad and half of Manasseh secure their territory. So they're not going to be able to say, we're not going to help you secure yours. They're going to go over there, and they vowed that they would cross the Jordan and help their brothers get their territory before they rested. So chapter 2, he's going to send spies. Joshua sends spies into Jericho. Jericho is going to be the first fruits of Canaan. Now, like we just said, they already conquered the kings on the east of the Jordan, some of them, but that was not actually the promised land. That wasn't the land of Canaan. They haven't gone there yet, other than the 12 spies going in back in Numbers 13. But now Joshua's going to send 2 spies. And here's an interesting statement in chapter 2, verse 1. And Joshua the son of Nun sent 2 men secretly as spies. He sent 2 spies secretly. Have you ever heard of a spy mission before that wasn't secret?
Not your book.
Everybody listen. She wants that book, everybody. Okay. A spy mission, he's going to send 2 men secretly. Now, what will be the point of mentioning that it was secret? Well, like we just pointed out, every single spy mission that's ever been done has been secret. So why do you think he says it's secret? Well, he doesn't mean it's secret to Jericho. Obviously, it's going to be secret to Jericho. It was secret to Israel. There's one distinction between this spy mission and the one before that Joshua was a part of. Before, everybody knew about it. Everybody awaited the return of the spies so that they could, hear about it, and it was a disaster. Now, Joshua maybe has learned from that. Nobody knows about this one. Joshua sends these 2 men without telling anybody. So they go into Jericho. Will you get him out of here, please? Thank you. They go into Jericho, and they come to the house of a woman named Rahab. And Rahab was a prostitute. Alfred Edersheim said, knowing God's purpose, she would shelter the spies and so further their errand. Knowing that he alone was God, she and all near and dear to her must not take part in the daring resistance of her countrymen, but seek safety by separating themselves from them and joining the people of God. And so she implored mercy for herself and her kindred. So what ends up happening, that's kind of looking ahead a little bit, Rahab receives these spies, and she's going to hide the spies. She knows who they are. She finds out who they are. But she hides these men. And, Jericho, she's going to tell them, we've all heard about you people. We've heard about your God, and we're all scared to death. That's what she says in verse 11. As soon as we heard it, our hearts melted. So they know that these people, Israel, are camped on this. They're camped and they're poised to come over. Well, these 2 men are going to be found out. It's just, there's no way two men are getting in there from Israel without somebody finding out. And as soon as they find out, they're going to go tell the leader. That's exactly what happened. The king of Jericho, he's called, he finds out, he sends people directly to Rahab's house, and they said, okay, get them out. Bring them out. Bring them on out. We know about them. We know who they are. They come to search out our land. They're checking us out, see our weaknesses, etc. Well, this is where we learn Rahab took them and hid them. And then she lies. We can, from our perspective, we can cut her some slack, considering who she was and where she was from. And the only thing she would know about Jehovah at this point is that he was tough and powerful and scary to enemies. So we can cut her a little bit of slack, I guess. God does not condone or commend this lie. And never does the Bible indicate anything like that. She tells him, or the men that were sent, yeah, these men came to me, but I didn't know where they were from. That may have been a half-truth. She probably obviously didn't know where they were from when they first knocked on the door or whatever, but she found out pretty quickly. That's why she's hiding them. But then she goes on and says, when the gate was about to be closed, they snuck out, and I don't know where they went. Now, that was just a total flat-out lie. She says, hey, if you hurry on, you might get them. Go, shoo, get out of here. Anywhere far away that you can probably still catch them. Well, where they really were is on a roof. The place where they would normally have the stalks of flax, or where they did have them. And there go the men to catch them. She says, I know that Jehovah has given you this land, and that the fear of you has fallen upon us, and that all the inhabitants of the land melt away before you. Something was different about this woman. She says, we know this is about to happen. What was different about her and everybody else? Well, the same thing that's different about any two people who react to God's actions or word differently. Think about the Jews at Pentecost in Acts 2 versus the Jews of Stephen's audience 5 chapters later. The Jews in Acts 2, 3,000 of them were pricked in their hearts and they repented and obeyed. 5 chapters later, the Jews were pricked in their hearts and they killed Stephen. So obedience came from one, murder and rage came from the other. But it was the same message, pretty much. What was different? Well, the heart of the audience was what was different. And so it is here. Rahab was of a different sort. She was more humble and more open to receiving truth and God. So she reacted differently. Rather than, putting on her armor, so to speak, and getting ready to resist, she says, she tries to help these men, and she says, swear to me by Jehovah that as I've dealt kindly with you, you also will deal kindly with my father's house. And they did. They vowed that they would do that. We will not let you, we will protect you. They swore the oath. And they set a condition that's very similar to the Passover situation back in Exodus, where they have this little ribbon or cord. They said, tie this in the window. Anybody that's in here will be spared. They go out, your blood's not on our hands. But as long as you and your house are here, you're safe. So Rahab goes down in history as a powerful example, but also as an ancestress of Jesus. probably her greatest legacy, other than, you could say it, arguably either way, whichever one is the greatest. She is remembered for both of these things, but James refers to her as one that was justified by her works when she received the messengers. Notice, not when she lied to the Jericho men, but when she received them. Hebrews 11:31 says, by faith Rahab the prostitute did not perish with those who were disobedient, because she had given a friendly welcome to the spies. Again, no word about the lie, because God saved her in spite of her lie, not because of her lie. Lying is always wrong, no matter what. There's no situation where any sin is acceptable. If it's sin, it's sin. So what she did was separated herself from everybody else in Jericho spiritually. And she obviously was already separate from them in some way or other. And yet she was a prostitute. Which is probably why the two men went there in the first place, because that probably was not an unusual place for two travelers to be going. So, she lets them out. They go. She tells them, you need to go to this place and hide for the next 3 days. So they do that, and then they finally get back to the camp of the Israelites. All the way around, sort of made a detour to avoid capture. So there's she's got the cord to tie in her window, and everything is set. Now, early the next morning, Joshua and the people are camped at the bank of the Jordan. Now, the songs, at least one or two of the songs that we just sang, has reference to this, just applied spiritually. So, on Jordan's banks I stand. It's referring to this. In fact, we're told that it was a flood season. So the banks of the Jordan would have been swollen, way out, way more than normal, the water level. But here they are. They're told to sanctify themselves. You need to sanctify yourselves. Just leave that there. Sanctify yourselves, which is a common theme whenever any sort of close proximity to God is in view. Jacob and his family, purify yourselves and get rid of your idols and change your clothes, because we're going to Bethel to worship. And Moses, consecrate yourselves, because in 3 days we're going to meet God at Mount Sinai. And now here again, a great thing's about to happen. So consecrate yourselves, sanctify yourselves. Tomorrow Jehovah's going to do wonders. He told the priests, you got to take the Ark of the Covenant to lead the people. They were to go into the Jordan, carrying the Ark of the Covenant. And the people, what was going to happen when they got the Ark of the Covenant into the Jordan was the Jordan River was suddenly going to be dammed by nothing physical anyway, just God, just like the Red Sea. He was going to part the waters, and they were going to cross the Jordan the same way they crossed the Gulf there of the Red Sea back in Exodus 14. So that's what's about to happen. They were to keep their eye fixed on the Ark of the Covenant. They were to follow closely. Be careful. Not because they might get lost, but because they needed to keep in their minds the significance of what was happening, and that God was the one doing it. So when they get across, verse 17 of chapter 3 says, the priest bearing the Ark of the Covenant of Jehovah stood firmly on dry ground in the midst of the Jordan in the flood season. And all Israel was passing over on dry ground until all the nation finished passing over the Jordan. Yep.
Visually, am I wrong? When Moses did this, didn't the Red Sea part and then they went across? But in this one, they were in the water.
Yeah, that's what it seems, that they had to go out there. Now, we don't know if God was parting it as they went or if they had to get out there in the middle first. I don't know if it, depending on where the Jordan wasn't just, like the Ohio River all the way across. In fact, I don't know if it's like the Ohio River at any point. But there are some places where it might be, just a little, what we would call a creek. Or other places it would be more wider. At this place, I don't know, because we don't know exactly where they were camped. Just we know it was opposite Jericho. It may have been a smaller part, but again, there's that flood aspect too. So it may not make sense that they had to walk out there without God doing anything, but they still had to go out there first, and maybe God was helping them a little bit.
Well, the choice of the words dipped in the brink sounds to me like they got, which would take a lot of courage. Water was rushing. They had to step in the water
Yeah.
before it stopped.
Yeah, I think it's clear they had to step in. The priests, anyway. Now, how far they had to step in before God started parting it may not be perfectly clear, but they had to start the journey, I guess, and that would have taken faith. Yeah, and then all of a sudden, and Joshua even gives us, pretty close to coordinates. I mean, he describes exactly where it was the waters would stop, and then they would be stopped here. They're going to stand in one heap, and everybody's going to go across, and then it's just going to go back to normal. So a great miracle performed here, which is why Joshua is going to set up these memorial stones as a memorial for this event, just as they've done in the past and will in the future again. When your children see these stones here and they ask, hey, what's up with these stones? Then you'll tell them, oh, this was about the time when Jehovah, your God, dried up the Jordan River and let our people cross over. So that concept of a memorial is something worth thinking about, I think. Just the idea of reminding of something that God has done. That's chapter 4. Verses 19 and 20 says, the people came up out of the Jordan on the 10th day of the first month, and they encamped at Gilgal on the east border of Jericho. Those 12 stones which they took out of the Jordan, Joshua set up at Gilgal. Also, verse 13 is what I meant to reference. About 40,000 ready for war passed over. So there were 40,000 ready for war. And here they are. They're west of the Jordan. They're ready to go. And they're here now. They're all in Canaan. So here is the camp here at Gilgal. So Jericho's shaken. They're scared. They're camped out there. Final preparations are going to be made. 2 things. Number 1, and this is chapter 5. The ones who were born in the wilderness wandering period, which presumably would have been a lot of them, need to be circumcised. The men, obviously, the males. No such thing as female circumcision in the Bible, and shouldn't be in any case. But that's something totally different than what this rite was that God instituted for His people. So they needed to be circumcised because apparently they hadn't been obligated to do that in the wilderness. Now they would. And secondly, they were going to observe the Passover, which had not been observed again since Sinai. So that was a special event, the first Passover in the land of Canaan. Here they are in the land of promise, and they're going to remember by observing that Passover feast for the first time in the promised land.
Okay, with verse 2, they must have circumcised them while they were wandering, because he said, do it a second time. So this must have been a special circumcision.
It could be, I guess it could have reference to the sons of Israel in general, like there was that time initially when God commanded it before the wilderness, and they did it. And now they need to do it again because they hadn't done it this group hadn't done it. It just depends on what is meant by the sons of Israel. If he's talking about literally these exact males a second time, or just here's a second time when the command to circumcise to the whole nation is given. I didn't think to look into that, but I will, because that is interesting. It says in verse 5, it says, though all the people who came out had been circumcised of Egypt, yet all the people who were born on the way in the wilderness after they had come out of Egypt had not been circumcised. So apparently there was a period where they did not practice that. Now, I'm not sure if it's ever explained why. I guess we could speculate. Maybe God didn't want these dead people, because that's pretty much what they were at that point, to do it, and he would just put it off until later. But at any rate, they apparently were not circumcised in the wilderness. In verse 13 then, we get to meet a very interesting character. When Joshua was by Jericho, he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, a man was standing there. Talk about making you jump out of your skin. Jericho, Joshua, I don't know what he's doing, but he's just sitting there, hanging out. I don't know. He looks up. There's a guy standing there out of nowhere. He had a sword in his hand. Joshua went to him. That's brave. And he said to him, I love this. He says, are you for us or for our adversaries? And this man answers him, no.
Then you're wishing you would have worded the question a little differently.
It's like, wait a minute. Did I say that right? Are you for us or for them? No. I'm the commander of the army of Jehovah. I take that to mean I'm not for either one of you. I'm for God. I'm for me. I'm on my side. I'm not on your side. I'm not on their side. I'm on my side. Now, you can be on my side too, but I'm not on your side. So in that way, he says, I'm the commander of the army of Jehovah. This is presumably the angel of Jehovah, which is presumably the pre-incarnate Jesus Christ, the second person of the Godhead, who is called the Word. He pops up many times in the Scriptures, in the Old Testament, that is. Joshua fell on his face to worship. He fell on his face and worshipped him. And the commander of Jehovah's army said to Joshua, take off your sandals from your feet, for the place where you're standing is holy. That ring any bells? I've heard that before. That's what the voice from the bush, the burning bush, said to Moses back when he was called in Exodus 3, which indicated that voice was God. Well, if that was the significance of that voice saying that from the bush, what's the significance of this commander of Jehovah's army? The commander of Jehovah's army is Jehovah. And Joshua took off his sandals.
If it were an angel of the Lord, he would not have allowed him to worship.
Yeah, that was a little hint. There's no rebuke of the worship. And we know from other instances that an angel would have, just like with John in Revelation, 2 times, John, the revelation, the vision that he saw came over him so much that he fell down and worshipped an angel. Now this is John in his elderly, wise, apostleship. And even he was overcome. He fell down, and that angel said, you better get up. I'm not God. I worship God just like you do. But that didn't happen here, which implies this is not a man, and or if it's a man, he's not a good man because he allowed him to worship him. It's not an angel. But then the answer is given in verse 15. This is God himself. Very quickly, then the first fruits. And there's a lesson to be learned in this whole event. Notice the language here. Preparations are complete. We're told Jericho was shut up on the inside and outside because of Israel. Nobody came out, nobody came in. That's what you'd call a siege. A horrifying and devastating, just absolutely horrendous stratagem of war that resulted in some of the most terrible things you could ever imagine. But it wasn't going to come to that in this case. Here's what we're going to notice. What God says to Joshua. See, I have given Jericho into your hand with its king and its mighty men of valor. And the very next thing he says is, you shall do all kinds of stuff. I have given Jericho to you. Now here's how you got to get it. That's very important, very significant. There are so many people that talk about things that God gives us, a gift from God, and how it's free. In fact, Paul says that salvation is a free gift of God. Eternal life is the free gift of God. Well, Jericho, according to God, was a free gift. See, look, in fact, he doesn't just say it's a gift. He says, I've already given it to you. It's yours. Now, if we were ever going to use that kind of language in everyday life, what would happen next if we showed somebody something and they said, man, I'd love that. And you said, hey, it's yours. What's the next thing that would happen? Yeah, here, it's yours. And you give it. And there it is. God says, see, Jericho, it's yours. Giving it to you. Now, you're going to do this, and you're going to do this, and you're going to do this, and you're going to do this. And then you got to go in, and you got to do, they had to do all kinds of stuff. You're going to march around the city, all the men of war, one time a day for 6 days. Okay? That's the start of it. Then the 7 priests are going to be in the front. They're going to bear the Ark of the Covenant. They're going to have their Jubilee trumpets. They're going to blow them continually. The people, however, are going to march in complete silence. On the 7th day, they were going to march 7 times. And on the 7th time of the 7th day, lots of 7s here, the priests are going to blow this special blast, at which point, when the people heard it, they were going to shout with a great shout. So, 7 priests, 7 trumpets, 7 days, 7 rounds on the 7th day. And God says, when you do that, at that point, when you hear that special blast of the trumpets and then all the men shout with a great shout, the walls of Jericho are going to fall down flat. And then you go in there and you devote every single thing to destruction. That was the stipulation. As the first fruits of Canaan, they were to devote every single thing to destruction, which means to destroy it for God. That's what devoted to destruction means. Now, later on, they were going to be able to keep some stuff and whatnot. This time, everything was to be devoted to destruction. Or else. And that's going to come back up later on. But let us just notice this. God can give gifts and yet require men to do things to receive those gifts. It's still a gift. But you got to receive it. Salvation's no different. We learned so much. God gave them this gift. But at what point did they receive the gift? In Hebrews 11, verse 30, is a very important verse here because of a very special word or a very specific word. Whoops. It says, by faith the walls of Jericho fell down after they had been surrounded or encircled for 7 days. When did the people of Israel receive the gift of God? After.
After they comply.
After. That's the key word. After. Now God, again, in verse 1, he says, or verse 2, I have already given you this. But they didn't receive it till after they did everything that God said to do to get it. At the same time, though, what connection was there directly between what they did and what the result was? Not a thing in the world. If you think about what they did, they marched around it once a day for 7 days, and on the seventh day, or for 6 days, and on the seventh day 7 times, and then yelled a bunch. It'd probably take 1 billion years of marching around it to make the wall. I don't even know if that would do it. Once a day? Now there's a lot of power in, constant vibrations, and just structures can survive these massive single traumas or whatever. But like a bridge, for instance, could survive or withstand all kinds of force, but this constant little vibration, maybe even undetectable, could really take it down eventually. But what these people did would never knock a wall down, much less flat. And yet, when they did what God said, God knocked those walls down. He made the walls fall flat. And that's the way it is spiritually. When God says do this and we just do that, and He does His part. They couldn't knock those walls down. They didn't have the technology, or they specifically didn't have the tools or anything. But God said, hey, you do this, I'll do that. Man can't save himself, but when we do what God has said to do, when we honor His conditions, He does the rest. He does the part that we can't. And the situation at Jericho teaches us that lesson. So they went in, they devoted it all to destruction, or so it seemed. And that's where we'll have to come back 2 weeks from tonight and see how that went.